Hello, everybody. This is Johns Hopkins, and welcome to one of our 5-minute Histories videos. Before we begin, I'd like to say a thanks to my film crew, who today is my 16-year-old son, Johns, and to my colleague, Molly, who these outdoor filmings have been great for me. They're super fun, but for her, she's had to up her game and learn how to do things like squelch out fire engine sirens behind me and things like that. So thank you, Molly. And then again, a special thanks to all of you who are tuning in, sharing our videos, sending in comments, and sending in support. I think we're building a really fantastic Baltimore community here and appreciate your help. All right, Franklin Square, it was originally in the early 1800s the estate of a gentleman named James McHenry, who was an Irish immigrant who came to Baltimore via a brief stint in Philadelphia. Lucky for us, he came here. In the Revolutionary War, he was General Washington's secretary, went on to become the Secretary of War under Washington and Adams. And out here, a few miles from downtown Baltimore town, was his country estate called Fayetteville. And if you know the street Fayette Street, which you're actually looking at behind me, that's where that comes from. McHenry had a wonderful estate out here for a number of years. He passed away in 1816, I think mid-18 teens. And in 1835, his estate sort of remained in the family, but in 1835, two brothers named Canby came down from Wilmington, Delaware. They were real estate speculators, and for $15,000, they bought 30 acres of the McHenry estate. McHenry, by the way, is the same McHenry that Fort McHenry is named after. And the Canbys did it in an interesting way. They made a partnership with the city, and they agreed to sell the city 2.5 acres in the middle of their new grounds for a public park, if the city agreed to maintain it using city funds. And that was great. It actually made Franklin Square the second public square in the city. Mount Vernon Place in 1831 was the first. But the city had an ace up its sleeve and sort of upped their ante by saying, we'll not only build you a park, but if you build 8 row houses that are at least 3 stories tall and cost at least $10,000, we will build a nice iron fence around your park, and we'll put in some paved pathways. And both parties lived up to their agreement. The park was immensely popular. And one day in 1850, one Sunday, the Baltimore Sun reports 3,000 Baltimoreans came out here to stroll. And the Canbys built the row of houses behind me, the Brownstones, and we're going to talk about Brownstone in a minute. And they're wonderful houses. So the city won and the Canbys won. But before we get to Canby Row, I just have to talk about the buildings on the east side of Franklin Square, Waverly Place. Waverly Place was finished in 1851, and here's what the Baltimore Sun reports on what it was then. The Baltimore Sun says it was much handsomer than any yet finished in this city, and displaying a pure Italian style of architecture. And it is wonderful. Today it's looking good. It's got wrought iron balconies on the second floor with French doors. It's built in the English basement style. Interestingly, in the Civil War era, it had some very interesting neighbors. There were 3 women, Miss Nanny, Miss Virginia, and Miss Julie, who were unmarried, and they were charged with being Confederate sympathizers. And their neighbor was a gentleman named Lloyd Sutton, who was African American and was brought up into the U.S. Color Troops, the Union Color Troops. So a diversity of folks living there. I will end on Waverly Place by saying the first floor is brownstone. It's painted, so it's hard to tell, but it is true brownstone, which gets us over to the Brownstone Row behind us, Canby Place, named after the Canby brothers. And Brownstone, let me just talk a little bit about Brownstone. I mean, you can see behind me the doorways and the window surrounds and the cornice are all wonderful. This was the first row of houses in Baltimore built in the Italianate architectural style. If you go to any neighborhood in Baltimore, any row house neighborhood, from Bolton Hill to Mount Vernon to Charles Village to Harlem Square, to all of those houses are Italianate style, and this is where they all started. And they are also true brownstones. Whenever I have friends visiting from New York, they come down and they'll walk around and they'll say, "Oh, what a wonderful row of brownstones." And I'll think I need to shake them a little bit and say, "No, they are not brownstone. Those are row houses. They are red Baltimore brick row houses." But these houses behind me me, actually are brownstone. In the 1830s and 40s, the United States cities were starting to build in brownstone, and the best brownstone masons in the world came from Wales. They were Welsh. And we started luring them to the United States to mine slate quarries and build with brownstone. Brownstone, like slate, is a layered stone. In the Mid-Atlantic area, there's a quarry at Delta, Pennsylvania, just over the Maryland state line, that was a slate quarry. Today, it's actually a public swimming place, although a little treacherous. The deep end is something like 200 feet. So if you go there, be careful. But the Welsh were coming into cities like New York and Philadelphia and a little bit Baltimore, building in brownstone. Brownstone is a tough stone to get right when you're building. If you don't get it exactly right, and especially in a humid climate like Baltimore, little droplets of water get between the layers. And then when it freezes, they pop, they expand, and they sparge. The brownstone sparges. And you'll see sparging in brownstone here in Canby Place and Canby Terrace, and in brownstones in Mount Vernon and Bolton Hill. I also think that we never had the volume of brownstone buildings going on that a New York did. So I'm not sure we got the A-grade Welsh masons. We might have gotten kind of like the B-minus masons. That doesn't help our brownstone. And I'll conclude by saying, if you want a really neat field trip, there is a little tiny, town is not even the right word, a collection of 1840s Welsh stonecutters houses in a place called let me actually get this right, Coulson Town, just outside of Delta, Pennsylvania, about an hour away. And there are 4 houses remaining, stone houses, of course, with slate roofs from the Delta quarry, but also slate sidewalks, slate fence posts, even slate rails. Everything is slate. And you can go up there. It's really a neat little place. It's on the National Register of Historic Places. So as you're getting more out and about from our coronavirus lockdown, I'd encourage you to come and take a walk around Franklin Square. Look at this wonderful row of real brownstones, and then take a little sojourn up to Delta and to Coulson Town, and take a look at those 1840s Welsh stonecutters houses as well. And with that, I'll say thanks, and we'll see you next time.